Restaurant Unstoppable. What the most successful restaurateurs know that you don't. I think what's really interesting, I love, and this is something that I've observed from my research and just from what you share with us, I love slow, organic, close growth. You start in one building. You consume you slowly start to consume all that's around you, and it's that slow growth. Originally, you started with trying different concepts, like that didn't work. So, like, what was going through your mind? Like, what was the approach you were taking during this time?
So
you already mentioned it earlier. You wanted to build community.
Yeah. So really, what was happening, like Tulsa, downtown Tulsa, especially, was in this weird spot where I personally was frustrated that more things weren't happening in downtown Tulsa. I just was like, why isn't this happening? Like, we're here, we're busy. Why aren't more people opening things around us? And so at that point, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna do it myself. Like, we're just gonna, we're gonna go. We're gonna start trying to build out this neighborhood because the cavalry is not coming. Right? Yeah. Now you look at it. When we opened McNally's 2004. Since that moment, there have been 120 new restaurants, bars, and coffee shops that have opened in downtown Tulsa. But up until 2000,
5% of them.
Yeah. But up until 2000, and when we opened Dust Bowl, it was the last in that run, May of 11. There had been like 25 that had opened, and we had opened 30% of them, right? So, so that was, I think, for me, like, it was just that push to, like, I want to see this happen, right? And so we bought some other buildings and developed them. I was working on some apartment buildings. I just had this focus where I wanted downtown Tulsa to feel like these other downtowns that I saw around the country that were getting redeveloped and revitalized. And it was frustrating to me that it wasn't happening here. But through all that, the city passed a bond package where we built a new arena. It's BOK Center just down the street, which, I mean, better or worse, we don't have any professional sports. But what that means is that facility doesn't have blackout dates for concerts. So since it's opened, it's been one of the top 10 concert destinations in the country in terms of tickets sold. It's crazy. And then the mayor at the time, when they decided to build a new minor league baseball stadium, flat out told me, like, we're going to put this as close to McNally's as we can because you were the one who got all this going, right? So, I mean, ultimately, like,
pays off,
it
right?
worked out, right?
Yeah.
But back then, it was that kind of singular focus. And
Wait, what? Just to make sure we're on the same page, what is the singular focus?
To me, it was to make downtown Tulsa as good as I possibly could.
I love that, man.
Just to bring my hometown back.
If you give, you get, man. If you put energy into something, it will give you energy back. It's that simple. It's a law of reciprocity. I can't speak right now. You know what I'm trying to say.
Reciprocity.
Thank you. Yeah. So, one of the things you mentioned earlier, which I thought was beautiful, or you started noticing there's a little extra cash. There's more money than you need in the checking account. Are you starting to are you being intentional with this cash, saying, okay, I'm going to need this for the next project, or was your reputation starting to precede you to now where banks are like, what do you need? We'll give you well, tell us what you need.
Yeah. So this is I'm going to get back down to 5 feet, but so we opened El Guapo's, which is our Mexican restaurant. At that point, I raised the money. People wanted to give it to me. The bank wanted to give me a loan.
That's 2007.
2007. And this is Mexican restaurant, very ambitious, rooftop patio. It's 3 stories. And my budget was $1.2 million, and we ended up spending $2.1 million on it. And I had hired the guys I thought were great who were going to run it, and I just, made the wrong decisions, didn't work out. And that threw us into this place where this unwinds very quickly, but all that cash we'd built up, not a ton, but there was a few $100,000 in the bank across all the stores, you felt good. All that money was going to keep that thing afloat and keep it from going out of business. And then 2000, financial crisis happens. One of those notes gets called. And luckily we opened McNally's in Oklahoma City, and it was a success day one, mainly because it was a 3-year project because it was another old building and it got held up. One thing. So anyway, we had this pent up kind of marketing apparatus, and people knew it was going to be there, right? And they were excited about it. And so it made money day one. If it hadn't, the whole thing folds, right? It was a house of cards. It was done. But when it made money day one, suddenly I had this original pub here and that place both making good money. And we had a couple little bars that made money too. They didn't need money. But that gave us enough time to then recapitalize the entire company. And so, I had to. I didn't have a choice. And we took on some private equity investors who gave us a couple $1 million to own half of everything we had. But that was money in the bank. It allowed me to recapitalize everything. And then that $2 million we took and then went and leveraged to do that big spurt of growth.
Okay. When you say recapitalize, what does that term mean exactly?
So I had to pay off some loans that had been called. I had to then change some of our other loans.
Is this around the time you started to slow down and you're like, okay, like we need to regroup?
No. I managed to recapitalize it, and then when they gave me that money, then I hit the gas. And, most people probably would have said like, let's take it easy, but that's not how I'm built. So anyway, we hit the gas, right? And then we deployed all that capital.
So you're willing to give up equity in your business for the opportunity to take it even further together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of that was they bought into my idea that I want to redevelop downtown Tulsa, and they believed in it and invested in it.
So how did your vision over time? Originally, your vision was I want to do beer. What was it? No, it was.
Food, beer, food, travel. Yeah,
travel.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Just,
but that was your vision, and now your vision's clearly changing. You mentioned earlier that you went from that to, okay, now I want to create things. I want to work on stuff. So you're evolving as a restaurateur during this time. So take us to your evolution of where you are, what your vision is, and what your a day in the life of Elliot Nelson looks like. How did your day-to-day change?
Right. So a lot of that was this vision that we're trying to improve this city, right? And so each thing we built was something that we thought added to the conversation and made the city better, right?
Okay.
So we were always trying to look at the competitive landscape and say, we don't want to repeat something somebody else has done. We don't want to try and just compete for market share in a segment. We want to create a new segment, right? And so, when we did it, like Yokozuna, our sushi there, the guy who runs still there. He trained under Morimoto, right? The sushi's really good, and it added a new element to that segment in town. And we have a sports bar next to the ballpark that we built in 2016. That's Elgin Park. We brew there. It was the first on-site microbrewery that anybody had done. There were some back in like the 90s, but they went out. So, it's on-site microbrewery. It's New Haven style pizza. It's things that nobody else was doing that we're really excited about. Our steakhouse, when we did it, was just, we're going to serve the absolute best thing we can. There's only 90 seats in there, so we were able to do it. But the menu's tiny. There's, I don't know, 10 things on the menu, but there's porterhouse steak for the table, a fillet, and then a nightly fish special. That's it. It's all entrees you can get.
There's a lot to be said about that as far as process goes and streamlining, right? Overhead,
right. So, but the goal of that was we want to push price point, and we want this to be like the best experience you can get anywhere. At that point, we were talking about we want this to be the best restaurant in the state, right?
Okay.
And so. You sit down, they come by. It's a little different now with COVID, but we'll be back there.
Hopefully.
You sit down, somebody comes by with a martini cart, you get a table set martini before you even get a menu, right? Just this experience where it's the same thing. Like, we want people to be there 2 or 3 hours, right? Just kind of settle in. And so, but that those things. So is it my vision, I think, of being a restaurateur and how I've changed is when we build something, it's to do something that we think moves the city forward.
I got you.
And so that's where we get our passion, right? And the times we haven't followed that compass where we've just said, oh, that's a good location, maybe this will work. It just hadn't gone that well.
Yeah.
That drive for us just isn't there. Right now we just opened our ghost kitchen a couple of months ago. And that was, we had a,
Let's show. I would love to get into that for sure. But some of the things that are going through my mind listening to you talk, the things I just can't help but be curious about. You mentioned earlier that it's all about creating opportunity. I feel like and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, you're opening restaurants at a rate faster than you could create new relationships, right? Like, how are you feeling these? Like, were you bursting at the seams with people who could run restaurants, or were you having to recruit and reach out to people? And I guess that's the kind of advice we could really learn something from. How did you grow your people to be able to manage these places, because you can't be in all these places?
Right. And that's that's the big challenge, right? I can come up with ideas. I can come up with ideas all day, right? And you can outsource architecture and design. yeah, man, it's just most of it we try to promote from within, right? And just continually grow ranks. But the other thing for me, and this gets back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, that I've given equity to 12 people now in the company, like real. So the way we structured it, I think a lot of times, and we looked at a lot of stuff, that like Outback for a long time was just kind of best in class, how they compensated their general managers and they gave them this ownership, but the ownership was never really there. Like it went away every 5 years and the GMs had to reinvest. And but we looked at all that stuff and eventually we said, you know what, we're going to have one company and we're going to give people stock in this company and they're going to own part of it. And they're going to get a K1 just like I do. And, maybe they're managing our diner or maybe they're managing that steakhouse, but they're also going to be tied to all these other restaurants in their performance because we are going to lift this whole thing up together. And so, we now have, I think my COO, I mean, when I hired him, he was the first non-restaurant person I ever hired. So, I mean, we call him the COO now. Originally it was just like, I had 5 places and I was the only corporate employee. Like, shit, I need help, right? So, he came on a long time ago, but I think Jim probably owns 8 or 9% of the business now, and then our kind of we call vice presidents of operations. There's 3 of those guys who each own, I think, maybe 3%. Like, so our employees who we've given stock to, I think now own almost a quarter of the company, and so that's something too that those investors that we brought on that was part of the vision. Was like, look, like, I don't need to own all this. I don't, I want to build something. And in order for us to build it and get these people bought in and to grow and make everybody feel like they're a part of it, we need to give them stock, real stock. So I think that's part of, for me, and this is advice I give to a lot of other restaurant people that are trying to grow, and I'm going to talk to a lot of folks, is don't get greedy. Don't feel like you got to hold everything really tight, be in control of everything. What you need to do is find people you trust and build them up and give them real ownership.
Yeah.
So that, because I don't think there's any substitute for somebody actually like owning it, like seeing their name on the.
Yeah, man.
On the,
we all want to self-actualize. We all want to have our purpose. We all want to have our. I mean, that's a part of human nature. You got to feed into the peak of human nature, and that's having your purpose, having like and having your name on something, like self. What's the word? Your self-esteem, right? And when your name's on something, that does a lot of good for your self-esteem. We need to feed into that. We need to feed into human nature. And I love this mentality, and it's a simple perspective switch. A lot of people, I'm just going to use 50% as an example, not to say that's the right number or whatever. They think of, if I open another restaurant and I can't lose 50% of that. I'm going to lose 50% if I bring on something. Right. You're not losing 50%. You're gaining an additional 50% that you never had. And you can trust. I mean, hopefully you built people around yourself. You can create an opportunity and trust that they're going to treat it like they own it, because they do now, right? And that's a 50% of cash flow you never had. And every new opportunity is another opportunity for 50% more, not 50% less. But for some reason, we see it as less.
I know. And I think it's a big mental hurdle for a lot of people. And I talk to people and I give them the same advice, and they're like, oh, I think you're crazy. Why would I ever give up ownership? I'm like, okay. But, you asked me about my day. So, I never answered the question. But, my day now, I mean, a lot of it's spent on financing and talking to attorneys and stuff that I just, it's not fun, right? Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, I would rather be out designing new stuff and building and growing, which hopefully we're getting back to. But you know what? My phone stopped ringing 3-4 years ago on operational issues, because those people who are now vested in the business, they take ownership. They didn't want to call me, right? Like, why would I bother you with that? Like, you go do that, which I trust you to do,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
You obviously are much better at going and talking to the bank than I am.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure the trains run on time.
Get in
right?
your lane.
Yeah.
We're designed to function and coexist in a tribe. And that's because we're stronger together. You take any one person, unless you're Bear's fucking Grill, you're not going to survive if I put you in the middle of the jungle. You won't.
Wasn't he the one that got found out anyway? I mean, I thought...
Is he dead?
No, one of the survival guys actually wasn't really doing it. There were like people off camera with like tents and an RV.
Maybe. I don't know.
But I don't know if it's Bear Grylls or the other dude. Anyway.